everybody, Kris White with the American Battlefield Trust, and I want to welcome you to our Remembrance Day coverage here in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. It's 2022, it's cold out, but we're having a lot of fun already here, getting to see old friends, making some new ones here in Gettysburg. And we're standing at a place that most of you have probably never visited, or maybe never even heard of, but it is Coster Avenue. Coster Avenue is a small avenue off of North Stratton Street here on the north side of the town of Gettysburg. So we would be on the edge of Gettysburg in 1863, right on that town's edge. But today, we're actually standing, if we have Sarah Byerly behind the camera, you can see some of the houses out here. But in 1863, you'd be looking out into 3 wheat fields that'd be looking north of the town, out towards the Harrisburg roads and the Carlisle Road as well. Off to my right is Pennsylvania College. Today we call that Gettysburg College. It's one of two higher institutes of higher education here in Gettysburg in 1863. It was founded in 1832. The other one is at Lutheran Theological Seminary, founded in 1826. So Coster Avenue plays into a very important part of our first day of July 1863 battle. But before we can get into what happens here on the ground beside this really cool mural, some monuments out here at the edge of town, I'm going to bring on our good friend Doug Ullman, who is going to talk to us a little bit about July 1st, 1863 and why this place is important.
All right, thanks, Chris. Good morning, everybody. So Coster Avenue is named for Colonel Charles Coster, whose brigade fought here on July the 1st. But we need to back up a little bit first. We're now on the afternoon of July the 1st. There is fighting off to our west on Seminary Ridge. There is also fighting in the plain of Gettysburg. The members of the 12th Corps fighting in that direction. Schurz's division, the 3rd Division, off to the left, and then directly in my front would have been the 1st Division under Francis Barlow. Where I'm standing now is about a mile south of Barlow's Knoll, just to give you a little bit of frame of reference here. When Oliver Otis Howard arrives on the field here and starts positioning his troops, he makes one key decision that whether or not you like Howard, you have to give him credit for this. He withholds the division of Adolph von Steinwehr and leaves them on Cemetery Hill. So when the rest of the 11th Corps becomes engaged with Ewell's troops, those troops are going to fight out into our front here, but the 2nd Division, Steinwehr's division, is going to stay up on the hill. While Schurz, who's commanding the troops out in the field here, is constantly sending messages back to Howard, asking for reinforcements, knowing that his troops are being overrun or in danger of being overrun. And then finally, at the last minute, Howard is going to release one of those brigades, the brigade of Charles Coster. This is 4 regiments, 2 from New York, 2 from Pennsylvania. One of those Pennsylvania regiments, the 73rd, is actually going to stay back by the town square. So only about 900 men of Charles Coster's brigade are going to come into this vicinity. The 134th New York, the 154th New York, and the 27th Pennsylvania, in that order from right to left, in the vicinity of what was called of Kuhn's Brickyard. This is a brickyard where bricks were made here for this town of Gettysburg. You see those uniquely colored bricks in town. Many of them might have been made right in this vicinity. At first, Coster is dealing with what's directly in front of him. These are the Louisiana Tigers of Harry Hayes coming directly at him. And as Chris mentioned, we have lots of houses here, but in the time of the battle, it have been those open wheat fields. So at the beginning of the fight, Coster actually has a little bit of success holding Hayes at bay. He's also got help off to his left, about 400 yards, is the battery of Lewis K. Hickman, his 4 guns of Ohio artillery that are also lending their weight to the contest. But unfortunately, what Coster and his men cannot see is what down in the valley of Rock Creek. Rock Creek is off to our right, and the brigade of Isaac Avery is going to sneak through Rock Creek and then hit Coster's brigade on the right flank, and ultimately penned in now on 3 sides. Heckman withdraws, Harry Hayes is in front, and now Avery on the right flank. Coster's brigade is going to crumble and then be forced to fight their way back to Cemetery Hill. Chris?
Thanks, Doug. You're with the American Battlefield Trust. I'm Kris White. We hope that you'll share this with your friends, with your family. Make a comment. Tell us that you're watching our feed here. We hope that you're enjoying this so far. And I'm going to bring on one of our Trust interns, Evan Portman, here in a moment. Wait, because I got to trade out microphones with him. But what we're seeing here is that the 11th Corps, the Union 11th Corps, largely made up of German immigrants, are going to be coming up into this part of Gettysburg. We have the Union 1st Corps over on McPherson's Ridge. They're going to be over into Herbst Woods. They'll be along the Chambersburg Pike and up along Oak Ridge and onto Oak Hill. So we have fighting to the west of town, the northwest of town, fighting to the north, the northeast of town, and we have Confederates coming in from a few different sides. At first, they came down the Chambersburg Pike, and that will be coming in from roughly the northwest. That'll be coming in from the Franklin County area. Chambersburg is about 23 miles to the west of here, and that's the seat of Franklin County. They will have that immediate engagement. Then we'll have a lull where we will have the Robert Rhodes division of Ewell's 2nd Corps. Richard Ewell will show up with the largest division on the battlefield, 8,500 men under Robert Rhodes. Robert Emmett Rhodes is described by Douglas Southall Freeman, that great historian. He calls him a Norse god. And he is a very handsome man, if you can imagine. And then that attack will falter, but then down the Harrisburg Road area, we'll start to see Lee's battle man, a guy named Jubal Anderson Early. West Point graduate of the class of 1837, will come rolling down and start striking into that right flank of the Union 11th Corps. Then we'll have more troops come down the Chambersburg Pike, more troops coming down from the Oak Hill, Oak Ridge area, and the Confederates, who outnumber the Federals. You heard that here. The Federals are outnumbered by the Confederates. They will start to apply pressure all around, and there's only one reserve position. That is over on Cemetery Hill. I call that the Alamo of Gettysburg. If they lose that, the Federals do, then they're going to have to give up this position here. And that is where we have 2 brigades. Those are in the division of Adolf von Steinwehr, as Doug pointed out, who has the longest name here at Gettysburg with 41 letters in his name. He is going to have his men up on that high ground, and one of those brigades makes their way down into this area, and we're going to have Evan Portman come in here to tell us about the fighting that took place here along Stevens Run on the north side of Gettysburg.
I got one from Doug. Thanks, Kris.
Off.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. It's great to be back on the battlefield here on Remembrance Day, and as Kris said, a lot of the Union troops in this sector of the battlefield are German or German immigrants. Names like Schimmelpfennig, Steinwehr, Schurz, and another German immigrant actually is the owner of this brickyard here, John Kuhn, who lives over to my left on Stratton Street, and his house is still standing today, and it actually has a Hotchkiss shell kind of stuck in the brick, which marks the approximate location of where a shell allegedly hit the building during the battle. So on July 1st, 1863, as Charles Coster's brigade deploys in this position, they're going to be facing north like we talked about, and he's going to have the 27th Pennsylvania, the 134th New York, and the 154th New York in his command, leaving the 73rd Pennsylvania behind. And Harry T. Hayes' Louisiana Tigers are going to hit him first, and as Doug said, Isaac Avery's North Carolinians are going to go around to the right of Charles Coster's men and kind of trap him in this pincer formation, kind of flank him, for lack of better words. And this is going to compel the brigade to fall back. The 154th is going to lose its color bearer. They're going to take very heavy casualties, and they're one of the regiments, Union regiments on the battlefield that take the most casualties in the Battle of Gettysburg in 1863. And one of those casualties is Sergeant Amos Humiston, which he has a pretty famous story here on the battlefield. Humiston is going to fall back with the brigade down to the railroad, which would be generally behind me, and he's going to be wounded. And he ultimately dies along the railroad back there. And a few days later, after the battle, when the civilians are sort of making arrangements to bury the dead, one of the civilians of Gettysburg happens upon Amos Humiston, and he's clutching a picture of his 3 children, Frank, Freddie, and Alice. And of course, he's unknown. Nobody knows who he is, but kind of this campaign is launched by a few citizens in Gettysburg, and they send word to Philadelphia and get this picture of his 3 children in the newspapers. And finally, a woman in Portville, New York, which is a small town along the Allegheny River, comes forward and says that she is Philinda Humiston, Amos Humiston's widow. So that's one of my favorite human interest stories, so to say, of the Battle of Gettysburg out here, and appropriate for Remembrance Day today. Kris, do you have anything else to add here?
Yeah, let me just touch on our Confederates who will be in this area. First off, you're with the American Battlefield Trust. We hope you share with us with friends and family. Hit that like button. And also check us out over on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, which we're always looking to expand, and we have a lot of our videos over there as well. But we're actually standing here, as Evan pointed out, in John Kuhn's brickyard. There would have been 3 brick kilns out in this area. You'd also would have had a lime kiln just down over off to the left. The Gettysburg Gas Works was just down behind us where we're standing. So you would have been at the edge of town. This would have been much more open at the time. But what the soldiers talk about, over here we see the monument to the 27th Pennsylvania. They're going to be up along Stratton Street, their left flank. Stratton Street is just over where the stop sign might be. Might be able to see some of the cars leading out towards Stratton Street. 27th Pennsylvania would establish the left flank of this brigade here. That would run downhill, actually. You might not be able to pick that out, but it'll run downhill where they'll link up with the 154th New York, known as the Hardtack Regiment. Then that line will extend even farther south towards Stevens Run. Some of the local Gettysburg College kids at the time called this the Rubicon. It used to run through their campus. And down there you'd have the 134th New York. But there was a gap between the 134th and 154th New York. So about 50 men of the 27th PA will go down there, fill in that gap. So we'll have about 900 Federal soldiers facing roughly towards the northeast. Now, coming down on them will be Harry Hayes. Harry Hayes has 5 hard-charging Louisiana regiments, the 5th through the 9th. These guys are going to come right rolling down through here, and they're going to engage with the Federals to the front. That's what's going to start to keep the Federals' attention off in that direction, as will the 30 or so men of the 26th Wisconsin who are trying to help out Coster's men here. They're from another brigade under the fun name to say Vladimir Shizhanovsky. And then we'll also have Heckman's guns that Doug pointed out, firing off into that direction. But charging down in onto the right flank and into the lowland across Rock Creek will be Isaac Avery's North Carolina Brigade. 3 North Carolina regiments, the 6th, 21st, and 57th, will come rolling down into the right flank of these of the Federals, and that's what the 134th New York will start to engage with. Then to the north of here, we'll start to see Shizhanovsky's brigade give way, and that will start to apply pressure on the left flank of Coster's brigade. And because of this hill that they're on, they can't exactly make out what's happening to the right and to their left. So now, with Avery's men coming across Rock Creek and then striking right into the flank of these Federals, that is going to start to push them back, and they actually hit a choke point, which they call a carriage gateway, that would have been off to the back here. The New Yorkers and the Pennsylvanians would have been along a fence that would have given them some cover kneeling down, but once they start to get away from this fence that you might be able to make out in our mural over here, as they start to give way, that's when they start to take heavy casualties. Now, how long do they stand and fight against these Cajuns and these Tar Heels? Well, one unit is going to say they fire between 6 and 9 rounds. Do the math, that's 3 minutes. 3 aim shots a minute. They fired about 3 shots a minute. They would fire for about 3 minutes. Others will say they're out here for about 5 minutes. Some will say 15 minutes. Regardless, the fight out here in the brickyard will slow down the Confederate momentum just enough to help extract more of these Federals from the 11th Corps so they can make their way back towards Cemetery Hill. And then the town itself will be filled with Federals. And the 11th Corps does have an advantage. They had marched through the town to get out to the Gettysburg Plain, as we call it, north of here. The Union 1st Corps, most of those troops had cut cross-country across the fields of Pickett's Charge, where they would go up onto Seminary Ridge, McPherson Ridge, Oak Ridge, and some other places like that. So that's what we'll start to see. They will have this advantage to start to fall back through the town. But as Evan pointed out, outside of the home of Samuel Russell, Judge Samuel Russell, that is where Amos Humiston's body will be discovered by one of the daughters of Benjamin Shriver, and that is where he will be found with that picture of his 3 children, that famous picture, the orphans of the battlefield, as they call it, later on. Doug?
Yeah, I just wanted to, give a little love to the 11th Corps here, because, if we remember, this is the same group, the same corps that fought at Chancellorsville, that was flanked by Jackson's famous flank attack and they already didn't have a great reputation before that, and they really lose their reputation after Chancellorsville, to the point where Alexander Schimmelpfennig seems like, people were waiting like a nest of vipers to spew out their hatred on this heretofore honored corps. And then they come here at Gettysburg and they are sacrificed here on the plain north of Gettysburg. And a lot of people at the time and even today think of the 11th Corps as this hard luck, no good unit of men who don't fight very well. These German immigrants won't fight very well. And frankly, that's nonsense, at least in my opinion, because look at the casualty figures. The casualties that are suffered in both the 1st and the 11th Corps are essentially identical. They both suffer about 50% casualties. And we don't say that the 1st Corps is made up of cowards and shirkers who ran away. Just as many of them were killed, wounded, or captured on Seminary Ridge as there was here in the plain of Gettysburg, in this vicinity, in the 11th Corps. So we don't say that. It's just this handed down anti-German sentiment that's sort of been passed on to us from the Civil War generation that many people still buy into today. But these regiments, especially the men of Coster's brigade, they're going to continue to fight and to take part in this war. In 1860, later in this year, they're going to be sent out towards Chattanooga to relieve the siege of Chattanooga. In 1864, when those armies are reorganized, they're going to be part of what was then the 12th Corps, now the 20th Corps. This brigade is going to serve in John Geary's division. And one man in the 154th New York is going to earn the Medal of Honor at the Battle of Dug Gap. So that's Sergeant Charles McKay. So when we think about these regiments of the 11th Corps, remember the fighting here that this last-ditch stand that Coster's men make here, and then ask yourself, would people who were really cowards fight almost to the last man in this untenable situation as long as they did? I think not.
Yeah, it's a good point to make, Doug, because when these 11th Corps men arrive here, specifically Coster's brigade, Charles Coster, his brigade, when he arrive up here, they're going to be put into position and hit almost immediately by Confederates. And add to that, we have a colonel leading the brigade. 3 of his regimental commanders are lieutenant colonels, and 1 is a captain leading a regiment out here. And he also only has 3 of his 4 regiments on the battle line. The 73rd Pennsylvania is actually up around the train station along Carlisle Street in a reserve position. So he only has 3/4 of his regiment down here, and they have been hit hard at a place called Chancellorsville 2 months prior. And we have preserved some of the land where these men fought recently down at Dowdall's Tavern. So check that out over at battlefields.org, where we helped to preserve some of that land. But before we go, I just wanted to point down in this direction towards Colonel Alan Jackson and his 134th New York. We had a descendant there talking about the 134th New York. They're going to be fighting down in that lowland. They're going to fall back off like this direction towards the southwest, and then we'll have out in this direction the 154th New York, and of course the 27th Pennsylvania. But if you ever come out here, Sarah, let's walk this way just a little bit. If you ever get a chance to come out to Coster Avenue, we are in the town of Gettysburg. This will show up on the National Park Service map. You'll be able to see the mural here to the fight in the brickyard. It's tough to see this time of day just because of the lighting, and there's some plexiglass over top of it. But this mural was placed here initially on July 1st, 1988, the 125th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg. It was refurbished in 2001, if I could speak in the cold out here, and then it was refurbished again. But this is a great mural to show the Tar Heels wrapping up over and around the flank of these New Yorkers, starting to push back Coster's brigade. Some of my wife's relatives are down there fighting with those Tar Heels, and they're going to be falling back, or pushing back, towards Cemetery Hill. The next day, Harry Hayes' Louisianans and Isaac Avery's North Carolinians will fight on East Cemetery Hill against 1st and 11th Corps troops during the fight on East Cemetery Hill that evening. And Isaac Avery will be killed in action and leave a note to his father saying that he died with his face to the enemy. Very, very touching story, July 2nd, and that's what most people know Isaac Avery for, is his last note that he leaves here. But it's not on this part of the battlefield. It's over on East Cemetery Hill, out near where the football stadium is today at Warrior Stadium. But down in here, they saw their first action at Gettysburg, and they helped to crush that right flank of the Federals. And one other thing to mention, keep in mind the flanks are constantly changing. The flank is the end of the army. Remember, at one point, the right flank of this Union army is up along the railroad cut. Then it goes up to Oak Hill. Then it goes on to the plain of Gettysburg, then to Blocker's Knoll, then it's down here, and eventually it'll fall back towards places called Wolf's Hill, Culp's Hill, Cemetery Hill. So their flanks are constantly changing. So we encourage you to head over to battlefields.org, check out our animated map of the Battle of Gettysburg. You can also check out our static maps that we have. We're known for our maps. Steve Stanley, our great cartographer. Check those out. They're all free over at battlefields.org. And be sure to check out our membership options to potentially become a member of the American Battlefield Trust to help preserve land. And we have an initiative right now going on in Gettysburg that we can use your help with, not in this part of the battlefield, but down by Pickett's Charge. And on behalf of the American Battlefield Trust, I'm Kris White. Thank you to Evan Portman, Doug Ullman, Sarah K. Byerly behind the camera. Thank you for watching. And thank you for supporting battlefield preservation and education.